I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to John Boehner, you ain't going anywhere anytime soon. Oh, it's a big news day on the show tonight. Red hot focus groups, but first, Red House Republicans. Kevin McCarthy of California is donezo. He won't be the House Speaker. Here is how the current majority leader announced that he was dropping out of the race to run the House of Representatives this afternoon.
I think I shocked some of you, huh? If we are going to unite and be strong, we need a new face to help do that. So nothing more than that. I feel good about the decision. I've been talking with a number of members. We've been thinking about this throughout the week, trying to see if we can get there. I just think it's best we have a new face. This Benghazi committee was only created for one purpose: to find the truth on behalf of the families for the 4 dead Americans. I should not be a distraction from that, and that's part of the decision as well.
So, John, there's a lot to unpack here, why McCarthy left and what happens next, but let's start with his decision. He says it's because he didn't think he could unify the House Republicans. What are the reasons that this guy will not be Speaker? Why did he start the day thinking he was running and then pull out?
Well, Mark, this is one of these moments that is a rarity in politics, shrouded in some degree of mystery. The House, his colleagues were shocked when he came in and made this announcement. The explanation that he gave there seems to me to be plausible and yet carrying with it a faint aroma of horsepucky.
There's going to be more to this story. I think it's clear, and it was clear to a lot of lobbyists, a lot of members of Congress, a lot of smart Republicans, that he was not up to the job from the point of view of the challenges ahead, keeping Republicans united, doing conservative things, raising the debt ceiling somehow, keeping the government from shutting down. He was, I would say, in the view of many of my sources, in over his head. And as I tweeted earlier today, the smartest thing he ever did probably was decide he wasn't the right person to be Speaker.
I think that's right. And I'll tell you that the Benghazi comment that he made that has altered our political world was not just a gaffe, but a gaffe of monumental proportions and the kind of thing that demonstrates the fact that he was not, at this moment, ready to assume the role of really the chief Republican in the country right now.
So when you think about what happens next, I've seen probably 20 names of people floated as Speaker. Paul Ryan is the one that Boehner wants. He's the one that McCarthy wants. He doesn't want to do it. He wants to stay ahead of Ways and Means. He doesn't want the travel and the management associated with being Speaker. The one name I've seen who I think could possibly do it is Tom Cole, the congressman from Oklahoma. All the other people, they underestimate how hard it is to be Speaker. It's so high profile. If McCarthy had said the thing about Benghazi when he wasn't the Speaker presumptive,
nobody would care.
No one would have cared.
No one would have cared. I think that there's a reasonably good chance that Paul Ryan's going to end up in this job, regardless of the fact that he doesn't want to do it. I know he doesn't want to do it. You're right about that. But the pressure he's now going to get, the sense that there's a crisis in his party, that he needs to do this thing and sacrifice his own interests for the betterment of the party, that argument that Boehner's making to him, McCarthy's making to him, our friend Robert Costa is reporting that people like Bill Bennett now, his friends, are coming to him, making his argument. I think he's going to end up there.
Here's a scenario where Ryan takes it. Boehner was sort of toying with the notion of trying to take some of these must-pass bill problems off the plate of
the incoming
successor.
Speaker. Right.
If Boehner says to Ryan, if I can convince the House conference to raise the debt ceiling, to pass a budget through the election, take all of these huge problems off your plate, and you just be Speaker from the time I get those things done through the election, and we figure out a way so you can spend time with your family, etc., I think it's possible Ryan would do it under those circumstances.
I think Paul Ryan cares a lot about policy and trying to change the policy agenda of the Republican Party. The genuine truth, in my opinion, is that the Speaker still is a more powerful post than even the powerful chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And I think that in the end, if he really thought about it, if he really cares about policy and the direction of the party, this is still a better place for him to do that work.
It isn't. It's drudgery. You have to raise money. You have to spend a lot of time in meetings, not on policy.
But he could be a different kind of Speaker, Paul Ryan. He's an intellectual. Boehner wasn't.
But Boehner would like, for the good of the country and the good of his legacy, to get these problems.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
So if he says to Ryan, and he says to the conservatives, you want Ryan as a speaker, you think Ryan's the one who can save you, then you've got to keep these problems from being the way he starts his speakership.
It's a powerful argument for Boehner to make. If I were Ryan, again, it seems weird. This caretaker speakers thing that's being floated on other fronts too right now. I don't really see what the upside is for people who would want that job. It seems to me if you're going to ultimately either accept it or desire it, you should want it for the long run.
And frankly, why would the House conference want an outsider to speaker? As everybody knows, the Constitution says it's clear you don't have to be a member of the House. They don't want an outsider. Why would they want a short timer?
Well,
and also, why would they want someone who would work with Nancy Pelosi? It's just it's a fantasy. You hear a lot of Democrats and liberals saying, well, this is an opportunity for somebody to basically do it in a bipartisan way. Yeah. No. The Republicans want a conservative speaker who will make conservative change.
Yeah. I mean, the argument for Newt Gingrich, of course, remains strong.
This
as if you think about real getting an outsider. Now that's a powerful outsider.
The two things we've discussed: why did he leave, and what happens next? There are no clear answers.
No, none.
We're meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. The House Republicans to try to find a path forward. But unless Ryan does it or Tom Cole does it, this thing could drag on for a while. John Boehner, older gentleman from Ohio, has the worst case of job lock right now of anyone I know.
And look, and the consequences of continuing disarray, and again, I think this is why the pressure on Ryan is going to be so great. The consequences of continuing disarray, not just for congressional Republicans, House Republicans, but for this presidential contest. If that House continues to be
and the debt ceiling.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, but that has huge political consequences for the Republicans running for president. This is a thing that affects the entire party.
We'll be talking more about this coming up. What our Republican focus groups in Iowa and New Hampshire showed us about the two big outsider candidates, and then what Dr. Ben Carson says about the focus groups right after this.
Last night we showed you part one of our Bloomberg Politics Purple Strategies focus groups. Tonight it's the real Republicans of Iowa and New Hampshire. First, we're going to show you what they said about the two front-running Republicans, Ben Carson and Donald Trump, the outsider candidates.
Let's talk about Ben Carson. What do you think his qualifications are to be president?
Common sense.
Clearly one of the most intelligent people in the race right now.
He has everything I'm looking for. I think he treats the American people and the other candidates with respect.
He's guided, I think, by very strong faith.
True to himself.
Deep, thoughtful.
He seems genuine.
But I want to play one little clip right now because this one got a lot of attention.
Do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?
No, I don't. I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
How many people agree with what Ben Carson said there? Everybody.
Someone who's leading the country, who's Muslim, in a country that is a majority Christian, in diplomacy, in foreign affairs, it would be hard to trust at this point.
Do you agree with what he said? Disagree?
Yes.
Scott?
Agree.
You agree. Marie, you agree also?
One nation under God.
Who else agrees with what Dr. Carson said?
Spot on.
Spot on.
I just don't think that I would support comments like that just because religion isn't having to do with issues. I don't think you should govern with religion either.
How many people in the room can imagine Ben Carson as president of the United States?
How many of you can imagine Ben Carson not only becoming the Republican nominee, but becoming president? Raise your hand. Okay.
I think it would restore some dignity to the White House. I think he'd bring back the stature of the United States on the world stage.
I think it would bring a lot of peace to the country.
What would a Ben Carson administration be like?
He would be going into negotiations or meetings with things well thought out, and whatever cabinet he does put together would probably be some of the top minds around as well.
He doesn't have the experience, but I think that can be refreshing.
He just seems like he'd be more of a soothing balm.
I really think that he could create a much more peaceful world.
The people who can't imagine Ben Carson as president of the United States, why not?
He's very soft-spoken, doesn't have a lot of political experience, right. And when you put him up against, like, Rubio, who's, quick with the answers, and when he has to stop and think about it, it just doesn't seem very presidential.
I don't know that I want my president to learn a lot from a book as he's governing.
His strength is that he's so thoughtful, but again, then his weakness would be that he can't
make those quick, hard decisions fast enough.
I think it'd be very much like having Mr. Rogers in the White House.
The message he's bringing is everything I'm looking for. I'm just afraid that Washington will swallow him up.
Robert, what do you think of the source of Donald Trump's political appeal is?
The WWF, maybe?
Just kind of reminds me of Mike Tyson in his heyday when he was just vicious.
I think there's a growing sense of nationalism that he's tapping into, but it excludes others.
I'm a teacher. If anyone in my classroom would say, go back to Mexico to a Hispanic or Latino student, they would be in so much trouble. But Trump can get away with it in a press conference, and everyone thinks he's just tough.
He is bombastic, I'll give you that. But that is his style, and it's served him well to date.
No more than 3 or 4 words, just a quick summation. What do you think when you think about Donald Trump?
Aggressive, nonsensical, over the top.
Not a strong Christian.
Straightforward. I think he's intelligent. He's conniving.
Intelligent, businessman, open-minded.
Open-minded would fit. Politically incorrect.
I would have to agree with you. Politically incorrect.
Mouth-shooting volcano.
Confident, arrogant, winner.
How do you feel about the fact that Trump is so brutally critical of some of the other candidates in the race?
I don't appreciate it when he puts others on the defense. So I think it makes him look, bad.
To me, it's kind of a vetting process, and if you're going to lead an entire country, you should be able to withstand attacks from another candidate.
You guys will probably, if you watch this debate, you'll probably remember this moment.
Mr. Arena, I do want to ask you about this. In an interview last week in Rolling Stone magazine, Donald Trump said the following about you, quote, "Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?" Mr. Trump later said he was talking about your persona, not your appearance.
I think women all over this country heard very clearly what Mr. Trump said.
I think she's got a beautiful face, and I think she's a beautiful woman.
What do y'all think of that exchange?
I think that she played it to her political game.
Yeah.
But
I think she responded beautifully, but I mean, as a woman, and I have 3 daughters, I could never vote for Donald Trump.
Because of that?
Well, not just because of that, just because of, I just feel like he's just like a ticking time bomb.
He looked like he was, like he had his hands slapped, and he was embarrassed, but he was trying to totally change it into something it wasn't. I mean, he looked like he had been caught with his hand in a cookie jar, and he looked stupid.
If it came down to a 2-person choice for your nominee, between Carson and Trump, I just want a 1-word answer. Who would you pick between Carson or Trump?
Trump.
Jennifer?
Carson.
Scott?
Trump.
Carson.
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 Trump.
Trump. Trump.
Trump.
Carson.
Carson or Trump?
Carson, hands down.
Carson or Trump?
Carson.
Carson or Trump?
Carson.
Carson or Trump? Carson. Carson.
Trump.
Larry?
I agree, Trump.
Carol?
Carson.
Carson as well.
So that was pretty interesting. A lot of enthusiasm for Ben Carson. Still plenty of enthusiasm for Trump, but less. What do you think is the main takeaway about the difference between Iowa and New Hampshire and the similarities?
Well, there's obviously more enthusiasm for Carson in Iowa, but a surprising amount of enthusiasm for him in New Hampshire as well. You'd think he'd be a stronger Iowa candidate because of his faith, and he spent more time in the state, and he's drawn bigger crowds there. I think that, at some point, could you imagine those two tangling? They tangled a little a few weeks ago. Yeah. At this point, they're in their respective corners. They're more focused on other people. But I think it's going to be fascinating if they ever have an actual showdown, maybe in the next debate.
Yeah, I mean, interesting in my Iowa group, one of the things that one of the clear differences, and we know this is different between Iowa and New Hampshire, evangelicals, a much more powerful voting bloc, very attracted to Carson. People would talk about how he's godly. The thing that I've always thought would be a problem for Trump in Iowa, it's there, which is that people doubt, for all he talks about the Bible, they doubt that he's really sincere about that.
And the degree to which people say Carson's ready to be president and might win. I was really surprised in both states. A number of people who, when asked for a short list of who can win, Carson was on almost every list.
Yep, they had some reservations. They really like his personality, though. Again, the question is when we get to time to pick a president time, will they think he's actually qualified? Foreign policy, domestic policy, all that kind of stuff. One of the things that we wondered is, having watched these focus groups, is what Ben Carson himself would think of all those things that people said about him. So we will find out when we come back, when we ask Ben Carson.
We're joined now by a real-life doctor, Ben Carson, MD, a presidential candidate, and the author of a new book, A More Perfect Union, along with his wife, Candy Carson, his 9th book. Dr. Carson, thanks for coming back on the program.
A pleasure.
We're going to talk about the book and the Constitution, but I want to start by asking about news of the day and an office that's mentioned in the Constitution, Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Is your party's search for a new speaker a crisis or not?
No, it's not a crisis at all. I think it's a very positive thing, that Representative McCarthy, in a very unselfish move, said, I want to do what's best for the party right now, and open the process up. I'm hopeful that many people will have a chance to speak out about their leadership style, and we can have a vote that brings people together.
There's sort of two schools of thought. Now, I'm pretty sure you don't want to name your favorite candidate, but there's two schools of thought. One is someone associated with Speaker Boehner and someone who's a newer figure, maybe someone newer to Congress. Of those two options, which do you think would be a smarter thing, a better thing?
Well, I think they both should explain their vision and let the members vote.
Okay. In thinking about the traits you'd like to see in a new speaker, what are those?
Well, I want to see courage. I've been, like many Americans, somewhat disappointed by the fact that, Congress has largely taken an observatory role, and the executive branch and the judicial branch have been more active. And, we need to have a balance of powers, checks and balances here. And that doesn't happen. And when one branch backs off, the others necessarily become more vigorous.
You said a second ago that you give Congressman McCarthy credit in some ways for the decision that he made. Do you fully believe the explanation that he offered, or do you think there might be something else going on here?
I haven't heard his full explanation, right. But whatever the explanation is, I think it was the right thing.
Right. Okay. You were able to take a look at the focus groups that we did in Iowa, New Hampshire, Market I, which were, I would say, pretty much unequivocally, you were a big winner in some sense in those groups. How odd is it, as you sit there and listen to people talk about the things they like about you, how does that feel to you, to hear people describing you, the personal terms that they use? How does that feel as you sit here as a human being?
Well, I'm gratified to know that people appreciate, the manner in which I've tried to conduct my life. I don't have a lot of skeletons for people to find. Right. I try to be honest. I'm not a politician. Right. So my finger's not up in the air all the time trying to figure out what people want to hear.
As we talk to people in those rooms about things that these are all undecided voters. They're not yet in your column. They've not decided yet to vote for you. The reservations they have about you, they think maybe you lack energy. They think maybe you lack experience, especially on the international stage. They think maybe you don't have enough specific policies. How do you hope to close the deal with people who are personally predisposed to like you but still have those reservations?
Well, I think that's why it's a marathon and not a sprint. Over the course of time, they'll be able to see. I'm pretty energetic. I just don't yell and scream. Anybody who can stand at an operating room table for 8, 10, 12 hours right. and keep your concentration has got to be fairly energetic. As far as foreign policy is concerned, I'm hopeful that some of these debates they'll actually ask me about some foreign policy and not just ask me race questions or something that they think I might know.
So your book's called A More Perfect Union. You're a doctor writing about the Constitution. There have been lots of books written by about the Constitution. What is the perspective you're bringing to these issues as a doctor and now as a politician?
Well, also as a citizen. Our Constitution was written basically at an 8th grade level. And, there are a lot of people say, well, you're not a constitutional scholar. You don't have a right to talk about the Constitution. The Constitution was written so that we, the people, could understand it. And the purpose is not only to define what our liberties are, but to contain the government. There's a natural tendency for government to grow and encroach upon people's freedoms. And if they don't understand how the system is set up, it makes it that much easier for that natural tendency to be realized.
It's been a while since we've amended the Constitution. People think because of the gridlock and the nature of our politics now, it won't happen again anytime soon. If you could, by yourself, unilaterally put into effect 2 amendments, what would they be?
Well, one would be term limits on congressmen, senators, and the other one would be term limits on the judicial branch.
What length would you like to see for the judiciary?
Well, you know, when we put the Constitution in place, the average age of death was 47, and now, you know, it's like 80. And, you know, I don't think that we necessarily need to have people who are, you know, well advanced in age when we have so many capable people below. And I would be very happy to engage in a discussion about what that age should be.
Give me a range. Would you say you're term limited based on how old you are or the length of time you could serve?
I think maybe a combination of both.
One of the things that we showed our focus group was your comments about not being in favor of the idea of having someone who is a Muslim be president of the United States. There are many people who objected to that on constitutional grounds and pointed to the Constitution itself and said, look, the Constitution explicitly says there should be no religious test. How do you reconcile your view of yourself as a constitutionalist, having written this book, with that question?
The Constitution also says we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And I said that I wouldn't advocate for such. I didn't say that I would preclude such from happening. So that's perfectly consistent with the Constitution. And also, I made it very clear before, during that same interview, that anybody from any background, religious or otherwise, who was willing to accept American values and principles and who was willing to put the Constitution above their personal belief would be acceptable. That should have been the end of it, but it was pressed further, indicating that perhaps maybe someone in the Muslim faith would not fit into that category. Right. And if they didn't, the reason that they wouldn't fit into that category obviously would be their embracing of Sharia, which is incompatible with our Constitution.
The book, again, is called A More Perfect Union, What We the People Can Do to Reclaim Our Constitutional Liberties by Dr. Ben Carson and Candy Carson. How'd you guys split up the writing?
She does most of the research, and I do most of the writing.
You bang it out. All right, Dr. Carson, thanks very much. Great to see you.
Hey, pleasure.
Appreciate it. Congratulations on the book.
Absolutely.
And we'll be right back after this.
Thank you.
Would you believe there are even more materials, videos from our focus groups? There are, and they are incredible. Rubio, Fiorina, Cruz, and the rest. Watch them tomorrow.
More focus groups right here. You can watch them on the website. Until tomorrow. See you then. Sayonara.